Hello everybody and welcome to episode 22 of Competitive Magic with the Carnies. I'm your host from Italy, Andrea Mengucci, and joining me we have Javier Dominguez from Spain.
Hello everyone.
And Anthony Lee from Australia.
Hola.
The Carnies today are bringing you some Phyrexia OB1 preview discussion. We are going to talk about some of the cards that, spike our interest across most formats. Mostly standard, but I have definitely one card to talk about in Modern. And then we're going to come across some of the events that happened over the weekend, mostly Modern, like the mocks. And so that's the plan. How does that sound to you, Carnies?
Pretty good.
All right.
I think it's always interesting in Magic to discuss new cards, and after the big companion or drain things or whatever, I feel like most of the good cards these last years, they haven't hard to spot. I mean, we didn't expect Shoulder to be as good, for example. All these new cards, there's a bunch that are good enough maybe, but also sometimes just end being bad. So I think it's very interesting. Let's see if we can find something good.
I mean, yeah, it's a thing that we always love to do and have never been good at and still love doing. So what more could you ask, right? Spoiler season's great.
Yeah, for sure. One more thing happened that I want to talk to the podcast listeners is that we have a Patreon. It's patreon.com/carnies. And I want to thank our first two Patreon. We have Jay Compton and our very good friend, Marco Del Pivo. Grazie, Pivo.
Yeah, cheers, guys.
So, yeah,
really
that's... Cheers,
yeah,
cheers.
Thanks.
We have our Discord open, where you can talk about all the things. So if you join the Patreon, we will obviously mention you as a thank you, as well as you can join the Discord together with us.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get into business, shall we?
Yeah, let's see. What's your favorite card so far, Mango?
All right, my favorite card, I thought about this a lot. It's Minor Misstep. That is the 1 blue instant, uncommon, and it counters target spell with mana value 1 or less. So, as you might know, my favorite format is Modern these days. I play a lot of Modern, I play a lot of Blue and Murktide. And, I am very down on Spell Pierce. The more I play, the more I'm down on Spell Pierce. And I was just really waiting for a card like this. I'm really excited for this card to try it out as soon as it gets legal. What do you think about this card?
Well, it's hard to tell. I think this card might end being acceptable, replacing some amount of Spell Pierces, but I always felt Spell Pierce is a little bit of a nod to how strong is Renan 6. I think if in a world where they, for example, ban Renan 6 or whatever, I think this card will have way more impact, but now I just feel like if you're on the draw, this card is going to be short a lot of times. And it's going to be good on the play, but you speak of, for example, Blue and Murktide. I mean, the whole deck is just so much better on the play that maybe you don't need exactly that. But I could see it being played in small numbers. Most notably, it's a very good answer to Lightning Bolt in many situations where Spell Pierce doesn't, especially in mid to late game. So I could see it being acceptable, but I don't expect it to be very good in the long term unless something happens. It does counter the Cascade spells. I mean, the Living End or whatever. But other than that, I will not think it's going to be great. I think that changes in Legacy, where there's no Grand 6, and there's not that many 2-mana cards that you want to counter, but there's more 1-mana cards, namely Brainstorm, where it's good. So I will expect it to be kind of good-ish in Legacy, but not so much in Modern. What do you think, Anthony?
I would be really, really surprised if this card was good in Modern, honestly. The big thing is that it only answers spells with mana value. Well, it doesn't only answer, but for the most part, it's only going to answer 1-drops, right? That's the best thing it does. And you most need to answer 1-drops when you're on the draw on turn 1, which is exactly when this card doesn't do that. And I don't even agree that it's necessarily that much better on the play, because on the play, I would much rather play a threat on turn 1 than hold up this for their 1-drop. So I think this card just fundamentally has too much conflict, and I don't think you can afford to play an answer like this.
Exactly. I specifically wanted to say that most people think that this card is good on the play because you play this go and then you counter the 1-drop. But where I like this card the most is in the late game, where Spell Pierce is often dead, especially against the most popular deck, which is the Mirror Match of Blue and Murktide or the Cascade decks, or even the Hammer decks, which I guess let's just focus on the other two right now. The players are always delaying the game. The mirror match especially just goes so late game that Spell Pierce easily gets dead, and the same thing against the Cascade decks. That Spell Pierce just, the more I play Blue and Murktide, the more I just find myself discarding it to Ledger Shredder because it's dead at some point. The good thing of Minor Misstep is that it's never dead. So even in the mirror match or against Breach, and of course against Cascade, but like most against 2, you can always be able to counter a Lightning Bolt or an Anoli Heat that to protect your Ledger Shredder, even late game, which is where I like this card the most. And of course against Hammer Time, it's amazing because so often you just die to a 1 mana Colossal Hammer with Sigarda's Aid in play. Even if, it's very late in the game. And this card protects you against that at any point. Of course, there are the Ren and 6 matchups. That is the biggest reason to play Spell Pierce, and Creativity. That is the biggest reason to play Spell Pierce. So I'm not going to claim that this card is better than Spell Pierce. I think I'm just starting to put 1 Binary Misstep, 1 Spell Pierce, 1 Spell Snare to diversify. But I certainly just adding a card to Blue-Red Murktide, it's not something that new cards do that easily these days, so I'm excited to try this one.
I mean, but the point about this card not being dead late game, but the cards that it fights also get worse late game in general, right? Like Ragavan on turn 5 or whatever is much worse, and correspondingly also most of those spells, other than exactly like Heat on a Shredder, are also worse. So I don't think this card is really that different. It's obviously better than Spell Pierce, which might actually just do nothing at all late game, but I think it's probably going to be the first card I would discard to Shredder anyway. I guess we'll see. But I also do think you make a good point about it being good against Hammer. I did underrate that, to be fair. Being able to just counter a Sigarda's Aid or Hammer might be absolutely massive. So I like it for that. I could see it as a sideboard card, maybe. I don't know if it's broad. Like, there's not that many cards that are good against both Hammer and, say, Rhinos. So, maybe.
I think Mango said something.
Yeah, so
I think Mango pointed something very important. Like, the card's like good in the situations, but it's sort of similar to Spell Snare, but it's better because it's useful in the early game, where Spell Snare sometimes it's not. Like if you're in the play, this might be better than Spell Snare or whatever, while still retaining this like I am not dead in the late game ability that Snare has. So maybe, the 1-1-1 split sounds like maybe fine, and I think that maybe that's the way to play it, right? Like just compare it to Spell Snare and see how it goes, other than, because I think Spell Pierce is a different card. Spell Pierce is a good in the early game against non-interactive spell decks particularly, and that in the late game, but this card is like acceptable in the mid game or early game, but like actually also acceptable in the late game. So that's why I think those two cards are more similar. I guess they are actually similar.
That makes sense. They just fit into different strategies that Murktide can employ, right?
Exactly.
Okay. That makes sense to me.
Another place where this card is going to go, I think it's in Blue-Red Prowess sideboard. Blue-Red Prowess notoriously played cards like a Flusterstorm and Spell Pierce and even Invasive Surgery to fight the Cascade deck, and I think this one is just better than those cards in the sideboard because, as you mentioned, it's good against Hammer Time, and just, you can cite it as against the mirror match as well. There's so many decks, it's just a pile of 1-drops, like the Prowess deck, or just any honestly just any red deck with Channeler and Ragavan is gonna also have Bolt, Heat, and so on and so forth. And I think this card is a good cyber card in those matchups. So I think it's, again, definitely something interesting that I am going to try out. And Blue and Murktide is my favorite deck. So again, excited to try something.
I didn't think of what you said, Mango. Like, I think, do you think, because maybe that's correct, do you think this card could actually replace Flusterstorm in most sideboards, not only like Blue-Red, but like overall? Because this card could be the new Flusterstorm, right? Because the Flusterstorm that also comes into Hammer, which is a little bit more flexible than Flusterstorm.
Yeah, so Flusterstorm against Cascade, once again, it really depends on the experience of the Cascade player, because playing around Spell Pierce is easy. Playing around Flusterstorm, it's much harder, because I can just go like Bolt Face, Flusterstorm for 4. So you're trying to play around Flusterstorm for 3, but you won't succeed most of the time. So I think Flusterstorm is still good against Cascade, but again, not only Hammer, but also just the mirror match. Like, this card being able to counter a Dragon's Rage Channeler, it's huge. Or, many other things, or like a Ragavan or a Goblin Guide, things like that.
Yeah, I guess if your deck has a problem with the Cascade deck, it makes sense to play Flusterstorm if you really need your card to be as good as possible against Cascade. But yeah, this is a card that is good against Cascade, but also does other things elsewhere. So
yeah, it's a Flusterstorm that also is virtually never dead, right? Like if you want to make the Flusterstorm, this card, like if you play against a Tron, you can just misstep a Chromatic Star, you know, like that's fine.
Yeah.
It's not like end of the world.
I could see that actually. Like
I'm a little bit more convinced now. I didn't think of this card as like a card that could replace Flusterstorm, but if it does, like it could be better than Flusterstorm at actually. I mean, also even like against Living End, you can easily see some situations where it is better than Flusterstorm because on the long game it is better, right? Like there's no like 7 mana player on Flusterstorm. They just like it just get countered. So I'm not saying it's better than Flusterstorm against Cascade. I'm saying there are some spots where it will be. So maybe it's like a mix. And maybe instead of seeing 3 Flusterstorms now, we see 1 Fluster, 2 of this. Maybe, yeah. I mean, I'm a little bit convinced. Yep.
Yeah, the strength of Flusterstorm against the Rhinos and Living End is that it dodges Force of Negation. So the way it commonly goes is they go Violent Outburst in your upkeep, you counter with Minor Misstep, and they Force of Negation. So they resolve.
Or Dispute.
But if you have Flusterstorm... Yeah, you can't exactly or dispute back like Rhinos does. So that's where Flusterstorm would be better. I honestly like this card. I mean, again, siding it against Hammer and Cascade, it's like a no-brainer. Like if you have access to this card, it's good there. But I honestly think that where this card is good, it's main deck because it's not dead in the late game as much as Spell Pierce is. Which it's a thing that I'm really starting to hate. Like at the last PTQ and Magic Online, I played 1 Spell Pierce, 2 Spell Snare, but I didn't quite like the second Spell Snare at times. So you know, just having a 1-1-1-1 split in a deck with a how do you say what's the word selection card, it's really good.
I mean, it makes sense in general that if we think a card is good because it is more flexible, that it is probably more of a main deck card, like or that it would add more in a main deck. That kind of makes sense to me.
Okay, I mean that's a good start. You know, that's probably one of the most stronger cards, if not the stronger one for the Eternal formats. I would say, right? Like Modern, Legacy Plus.
Yeah, the bar's pretty high, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, because it's a potentially playable counterspell. That's a lot. Yeah.
It's the right color, you know.
Also that, yeah, true.
Alrighty.
Okay, Javier, it's your time. What do you bring to us?
I mean, the one I like the most now, so far, if I want to say this, Phyrexian Champion, which is like sort of a time-shifted Phyrexian Obliterator. Time-shifted or color-shifted to white. So it's a 4 white, like white, 5/5 flying. And I think the ability is similar to Boros O'Connor, where, you know, if it's could be dead damage, it deals it to another target, but this time the damage is prevented. So it doesn't die to damage, but also gives the damage back to something else. It's like sort of a down elemental for those that are like not that young. It's like a card from Scourge that used to rule the skies in Onslaught block around 2002 or whatever. Like,
oh wow,
yeah, it's been
I
a long.
just looked up Dawn Elemental. This one's this one's better.
It's Dawn Elemental plus Boros O'Connor, pretty much, right?
Yeah, that's
Dawn Elemental was good back in the day, of course. It made the mono white deck exist, blah blah blah. But this is another 20 years have passed, 20 years of power creep, but this card is good. I think it might probably be like better than Phyrexian Obliterator, which is not exactly a bad card, but also not like a card that has seen like a lot of high level constructed play. This card is better. For starters, it's white. White is often not seen like as one of the good colors, but mono white strategies, they tend to exist quite often in standard formats, like in small formats. Mm-hmm. And I mean, now there's like a tier 1 or tier 2 mono white deck in standard, right? And there's also this mono white splash blue, so there are white decks around. And this card is just like very good. It just doesn't die to combat against anything, of course, but also like it's very hard to raise. Like if they're blocking with this, it's you better have like a lethal attack or something. And it just also kills the creatures. So I think it's good. It also probably has like some kind of combinations, the same way Boros O'Connor did. But then again, the 4 white is a little bit like, it will probably stress the mana base a little bit, but you can have like 8 dual lands or 12 with triumphs and just splash a second color for like a red card that has like...
Well, if you can play Invoke Justice, you can play this card, right? So
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can play this into Invoke Justice. That is super strong, right? Yeah. So yeah, I just think this card has a lot of potential. I think it might be one of the best for small formats. And I expect to see this guy being played. I'm not exactly sure how, but I mean, it's just like a perfect fit for the smaller white mid-range deck in standard. Like, it's so perfect that it's like, like it's gonna make the deck better. The weakness of this card, of course, once again, Invoke Justice, which is sort of becoming the police of standard right now. It reminds me a little bit of, like Invoke Despair, sorry. It reminds me of like this year where we had like this Channel and Glory Bringer, where all the 4 mana cards or more that had less than 4 thousandness were like bad because of that. I think this sort of is a similar situation, but this card might be good enough that, like it might be good enough to just be good against it. Also, it's a perfect follow-up for welcome wedding announcement, because if you wedding announcement into this, then the token can sacrifice to Invoke, and then you're guaranteed to have the champion alive. So yeah, I mean, this card is unbeatable in combat, flying, evasion, good stats, very hard to attack into. I would expect a lot of standard games to be like this guy against Shieldred and this guy often winning. We'll see.
I think the white decks are typically quite good against Invoke Despair, which is one of the things that is appealing about them, because it's not just wedding announcement, it's stuff like Ambitious Farmhand, or even sometimes you see Spirited Companion that make it so you have a lot of fodder to put in front of Invoke Despair. For me, I think Phyrexian... I don't think Phyrexian Champion will be the actual name. I mean, the reason we're just calling that is because that's the current translation for the German name. But the thing that would be more concerning is kind of the same thing that pushed out Shieldred, just that way you can't really play a 4-mana creature that doesn't generate value against... I mean, the original reason that people thought that Shieldred might not be very strong, and that didn't apply at first, but that has applied at some points in Standard, would also apply to this card, right? Like, where if there are too many go for the throats, it's kind of rough to play this and have it trade down that way. And, in recent Standard formats, we have seen that Shieldred has been on the downswing, and, you can see that applying to this card as well. I do think it does play quite a bit like Shieldred overall, because it kind of does the same thing as well, where if you put this against an aggro deck, it's pretty hard for them to get through. Although this might have even more immediate impact, I suppose. It's probably pretty hard to combo with this card because of the mana cost, but maybe there's some red card you can pair with it. Because I know there were white-red Invoke Justice decks, so maybe there's some red card that's good with this. Dealing damage. Some green card that fights.
Brotherhood Sent. Boom. Yeah, fight spell with this, they're gonna wipe the opponent's board.
This would be kind of nice. Yeah.
I was thinking the fight spell that you have is Bushwhack, the one that's in Cube on Magic Online as well.
I think that's a good card.
But that one is better with Obliterator though. So I don't know if that will be the route. If you're gonna play Bushwhack,
also you can't really play that card with Phyrexian Champion, because Bushwhack requires you to put a bunch of basics in your deck, and that's not super cool with playing 2 colors in this card. But there must be some fight spell, I assume, or a red burn spell that's good.
Yeah, this card is also good with some kind of like Pyroclasm effect, like you have the 4-mana Saga.
Sure, like Harvested Brotherhood's End, that's really nice.
Damage.
Yeah,
Brotherhood's End, but that's...
Yeah, so I like this card design. I think it's probably better than Obliterator, which, by the way, Obliterator is a card that, it's like it's powerful enough to see play in Standard, but it will likely not see that play, but who knows, it could... I mean, I will not be surprised if it sees some play, but I guess in this case there's Shieldred, which is sounds like still better. I guess they didn't expect Shieldred to be as good. I think
they were undecided. I think it was unclear. It might have been as unclear to them as it was to us when it was spoiled, which I think is the most exciting place.
Yeah, exactly. But I like this card, and I think this one will see play.
Flying is just such a huge difference, right? I think flying is really, really a big deal. We've noticed a lot of cards overperform a little bit because they happen to have flying. Like, for example, Steel Seraph is so good because granting flying is way more powerful in this standard than it has been historically. So I think this card having flying compared to Obliterator is actually a significant advantage if you're comparing the 2 cards.
Yeah, so, I think this card is slightly better than Obliterator. Yeah. That's what I mean.
Some high hopes.
The text is worse if you look at the text, but I think the combination of flying plus also the color being stronger and now, I think this has more chance to be played.
That's kind of funny to say, isn't it? Given the discourse over from the last couple of sets, you're like, well, this card is white instead of black, and that makes it better.
Yeah, I guess it does make sense though for a 4-white card.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree, but it's just funny to think about. That's where
It
we are now.
is. Yeah, that's true. It just came natural, but I think mono white decks are just like acceptable, but mono blacks are just like you could play Assault Obliterator in a deck with mono black splash Fable, but then why are you not playing Shieldred, right? So.
So one thing is that I've been playing some standard, and Shieldred against mono red dies to the 3 mana 5 damage card.
Mm-hmm, yeah, exactly.
Which
this one, like, what are they going to do?
This guy doesn't die.
Yeah, exactly.
If you play mono red and they play this card, Mengu.
Yeah, I think both the Phyrexia Champion, if it's called this way, and the Phyrexia Obliterator are just so powerful against mono red, because the only way that the mono red deck interacts is by damage.
Mm-hmm.
And this one, like, even if it stays back to block, it's like
just done.
What can they do?
They just can. I think they just both kill Mono. Like if either of these becomes like remotely playable, I think Mono Red is gonna have a rough time. I'm pretty sure there will be like cards. I don't know, like maybe they have like threaten effects or something, but that's already like a high mountain to claim.
Curving Steel Seraph into this thing, like giving this thing vigilance or lifelink, just seems like such a horrible nightmare.
It sounds to me like a standard playable mana curve.
Yeah, for the aggressive decks, I think it's really
and
difficult.
And we talked about mono red. We talk about like an actual good deck. Like it won the most recent standard challenge of Magic Online. So it's not like a fringe deck that sometimes you play against, in the random queues.
But,
so
I mean, it's not like it's bad against soldiers, right? I mean, having flying is a huge deal against soldiers for sure.
I mean, you play this against soldiers, and they better have an interaction spell. Otherwise, they also cannot attack like ever.
Exactly. Also, it can't be Brutal Cathar. Because if you put this under a Cathar, then I don't know if you can ever attack again.
Yeah, it's risky also.
Yeah.
So the clean way to Kindles are in white you have Destroy Evil. Mm-hmm. In black you have Go for the Throat.
Yep.
And those seem like the best way, right?
Yeah,
or even the Lay Down the Earth seems good. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's not. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you have to play some dedicated removal in all your standard decks, so it's not like you won't have an answer ever, but you really have to have it. Yeah.
I've been so impressed by Lay Down the what's the name?
Lay Down
the Arms.
Yep.
Wow, it's so powerful.
Yeah, it's a really good card. Yeah.
That also plays well with this one. If you mana base have 24 planes or whatever, this card also, it's gonna be easy to cast.
Yeah, because you have to play all those planes for Lay Down the Arms, and so just 4 white is not a problem. Yeah. You probably have to give up the various like Roadside Reliquary or Mishra's Foundry
done
at this point.
Yep. It's not a hard sell.
Yeah. And it's not like they were broken or anything.
What do you think about the new common lands, the one that comes into play tapped and you can sacrifice them to draw a card? Maybe those could be the new like useful lands, the ones you have to play monocolor with like mono planes.
So they're coming to play tapped, like cycling lands, but they don't cycle, they just sacrifice?
Like the
I mean, they don't sound very strong for constructed, but maybe you can play like 1 or 2 on mono white. I guess maybe you can play 4 in mono white. The canopies, right? The canopies are coming to play tapped.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, because my fear of playing a deck with like 24 planes is that you flood and like,
that card's good. You can play. I think that those. I mean, I think I could see a mana base of like 21 planes on 4 of these lands, or 22 and 3 of these lands. Then that could definitely work.
Like maybe, but the thing about a lot of standard games and decks is that the games go so long and people don't run out of gas. Part of that is because people don't run out of gas. You actually have stuff to do with your mana a lot. Like it's not that weird to be like, finally, I've reached 10 mana, so I can make this play and this play now. Like
activate Buster. Play this one. Play this one. Yeah.
Or like playing around Make Disappear. Like all that stuff comes up a lot, and I think flooding is not that big an issue in standard usually because
I have a question for this. Now I thought like Dawn Elemental. Do you know which card was the follow up for Dawn Elemental? Temple of the False God. Would you guys think this card will be playable right now in a standard?
Right now? Probably not, but only because colorless lands are so bad. But I think in general it would be good.
Okay, because it's a card they never reprinted, and I think it could be like interesting. Yeah,
I think it would be because it would be a reward for not playing the cards like right now. Its mana bases are so hostile because of cards like Corpse Appraiser, Raffine, Invoke Despair. Like it's tough, right? Like the colors, it's really hard for a colorless land to be good. I think that one's like not enough, but maybe it would be enough to make me think about doing differently, right? Okay, maybe, yeah. It's tough though.
All right. That's a new Phyrexian 4-mana card to the family of 5/5s for 4. Okay, what about you, Anthony?
He has another very very, very interesting 4-mana card over here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because so Javier picked a 4-mana 5/5 flyer. So in order to one-up him, I've chosen a 4-mana 6/6 flyer, right? Which is just better. I don't really know why Javier didn't think about this. So this card is a Archfiend of the Dross, which is a... I mean, there's been a few cards like this in the past, I think, but this is by far the best of the lot, I think. This is 2 black for a 6/6 flying Phyrexian demon. It enters the battlefield with 4 oil counters, and I guess a bunch of cards have oil counters or do things with oil counters or grant them. And at the beginning of your upkeep, you remove an oil counter from it, and then if it has no oil counters, something bad happens. You lose the game, but you know.
That's pretty bad.
And whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, its controller loses 2 life. It's a 6/6 flyer, yeah. So there have been cards like this: Abyssal Persecutor, Desecration Demon. Maybe there was some other I forget, but
that was pretty good also.
Yeah, most of them were just okay. Demon was played for lack of better options, I think. But I think this card is actually actively good. So the way I would frame this card is that I actually think of it as a more aggressive Shieldred. I just don't think the drawback on this card matters that much. I mean, there are some features that I think you're supposed to use, like maybe you're meant to proliferate or use the cards that grant oil counters, like the Monumental Facade or whatever, to delay you losing. But I'm pretty sure if you just attack with this a couple times, you just kill them and you don't care about the drawback. Worst case scenario, I guess you might have to Infernal Grasp or go for the throw your own Archfiend just to not lose. But yeah, I think this card's just a super fast clock because like 6 power flying is a lot, but also that ability is quite impressive, right? I could easily see this thing doing 8 damage a turn if you...
Yeah, it's a Massacre Worm, yeah.
Like Massacre Worm, yeah, that's where the last ability's from. Yeah, or if your opponent has a bunch of tokens, like they might just die, right? Like if your opponent just has a bunch of nonsense from Wedding Announcement or something, or they're playing Soldiers, and you have this.
And a sweeper maybe?
Yeah.
Like Brotherhood's End.
I mean, a sweeper would be the dream. Like your Brotherhood's End and just kill them. But even, yeah, just being able to go like Bloodtide Harvest to kill your guy, play Removal Spell, kill your guy, like it's 10 damage, you know? Like, yeah, I think this card is a... Yeah, I would frame it like a more aggressive Shieldred. Except, yeah, I think the drawback is not about the literal drawback on the card. I think it's just that it's just more aggressive in general. Because with Shieldred, a bunch of the time you just sit around and drain them out very slowly. This doesn't have any defensive application because of that drawback, I think. But it's so easy to build in a way that it shouldn't be something that you do anyway. So yeah, I'm very interested in this card. I'm not saying it's a better Shieldred overall. But I think it could be better than Shieldred if you're playing something like Mono Black Aggro. This might be better.
Or you could play both, right? You could also play like 3 and 3 because you don't want to. Yeah, you don't necessarily don't want to play that many Shieldred. This is probably better than Obliterator, isn't it? Against non-mono red.
So. Yeah, that's why I'm so sure Obliterator won't see play, because I don't think you would ever play Obliterator over this if you were aggressive. And then if you're defensive, I also think you wouldn't ever play Obliterator over Shieldred. So
I guess at least main deck. I think on the sideboard you might want to play Obliterator, specifically against aggro, but
I could see that, yeah.
That's a lot of 4 drops. That's like Archfiend, Obliterator, Shieldred. That's yeah. Black is now
reaching. Not even mentioning some that were played before, like Sorin or whatever. You know, like spoil for choice.
Those are GG, I think.
Mm-hmm. Is this the card that Pioneer Mono Black needed?
I don't have any comment about Pioneer, so. I don't know.
Oh, right,
you can speculate if you like, though. I mean, we won't respond, but you can speculate.
This card doesn't look as good to me.
Okay. Sorry.
That's okay.
No, but it looks like a very good card. I mean, those 4 drops are like there's so many 4 drops.
I mean, I like that there's some choice, you know, and it's not clear which one is best for which situation. But I mean, I think the card's good, by the way. But also, even setting that aside, how good it is, it has to be. You've got to feel a little bit of a rush, right? Got to feel something. You know, got to race your own card before it kills you.
Yeah. I want to say something about these 4 drops because Archfiend of Draws, Obliterator, and the White Guy. Like, I want to props like the designers because those 4 drops, they seem very good. They're also like interesting or whatever, but they also like didn't necessarily think like playing them invalidates the other 4 drops the same way like Gideon, Alive Zendikar. You know, like you play Gideon, Alive Zendikar, and the game's like you win the battle, you win because of it. But if you play this guy and they play the same guy on the draw, well, you guys are in parity. Of course, being first is better because you can remove them, but it doesn't exactly invalidate itself. And I like this kind of big drops in standard because I think they tend to involve like answers or threats being fine, you know,
lining up.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
like
good.
it's not
That's
like, you know,
standard.
I lose the die roll, so my archfiend is unplayable. No, I can play it still. You know, like that's I like that kind of design for these big cards.
Good. And they don't really invalidate anything. They're not like, say, I don't know if you guys remember Patrick Sullivan's rant about Ravenous Chupacabra, but this doesn't like just make a whole class of cards just suck. You know, like it. They're just good threats. That
will invoke, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, Invoke is maybe closer to that, but that one's conditional. Like, it's not as generic as Chupacabra, right? Or it's just locked in value.
I mean, I think nowadays in standard, playing creatures and or planeswalkers and on enchantments is like...
Yeah.
Every single deck does.
Right? Like, that's why I think Invoke is variable. I think Invoke, you can work around with creatures or enchantments. I do think Invoke basically deleted a lot of planeswalkers from standard, except ones that jump certain hoops, but... Yeah. I would say it's not in the same class as Chupacabra, but it does kind of go along the same way where you're like, oh, I can't put this card in my deck because
it's different, but it's, I mean, I definitely have felt like that in standard where, you know, I want to play this card, I want to play this Teferi, whatever, but like now it's a Planeswalker and they just cannot, you know, like I feel like I cannot because I'm playing my Planeswalker on 5, they're playing Invoke and they're getting the temp advantage and that's just not good. And these cards do not feel like that. So I like this design.
The worst thing possible against this is like some sort of like pacifism effect or like doesn't untap effect, something like that.
Yeah, that's 2 cards out of 2 Mango that die to pacifism effect. I'm just saying.
No, but like it's pretty bad to pacifism this thing because you die in 4 turns.
Do you actually want to know the literal worst thing that can happen if you have this card? If your opponent ever hits you with Glister Sunslayer, that's by far the worst one.
Oh, remove all the counters.
Yeah, that one removes 3 counters.
Yes.
From a permanent.
No. Wait.
What card is it?
You die next upkeep, right?
Yeah, you die in the upkeep. Yeah. Glister Sunslayer has a bunch of abilities, but when it deals combat damage, you choose an ability, and one of the abilities is remove 3 counters of a type from target permanent. So that would suck.
Nice. Someone will die like that in draft. I can see that.
I hope so.
I hope to see the screenshots.
I've seen a card that I...
What's that?
I've seen a card that I definitely want to add to my cube. That is the Anticipated that Proliferate.
That's pretty cool. I mean, every card proliferates in this set. They just took a bunch of cards and added Proliferate onto the text.
Yeah, many cards randomly proliferate. Like I don't know exactly why.
But this reminds me, by the way, with Proliferate. Okay, I hope someone can share my dream. But what I really want to do at some point in the standard is have to proliferate my opponent's Reckoner Bankbuster so that they can't make a pilot with it.
And they die. Yeah.
That's my dream. I don't know if it's going to happen, but you know, I've got like a few months to do it.
So which card do you want to add, Mango, to the cube? I didn't understand it.
Experimental Augury is the name.
There's like, it's an Anticipate, but it proliferates. I have Anticipate in my cubes.
Okay, I mean that's better. I mean, also Anticipate. I mean, a proliferate for cube is really fun. There's a lot of strange things you can do. I remember playing with Yawmoth, and there's like infinite weird situations where proliferate actually matters in cube. Like, you know, proliferating,
it's a really
like
cool mechanic. Yeah. It's so open ended, right? And it does things that you otherwise can't do. It's an awesome mechanic.
Yeah, like this Planeswalker, this scanner, whatever, this -1, everything. Yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah, it's probably why they put it on like 80 cards in this set. But I'm not going to complain because it's fun. So.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm not complaining either. I like it. Yeah.
Alrighty.
Yeah, it's so good. One of the things that I enjoy proliferate the most is when you proliferate into a planeswalker and then you ultimate it the same turn. Like your opponent didn't play around, and you know all of a sudden you just ultimate.
Although I guess that probably happens more in cube where it's not a large part of the environment. I do think a lot of standard and limited is going to involve like thinking about, hey, what happens if my opponent proliferates once or maybe even twice? You know, I think that's really interesting. Like right now, everything like planeswalkers tick up at a certain rate, and you kind of know when it's going to happen. Or sagas, like you're like, okay, I can say I have like another turn to like draw cards so that I can find a removal spell for my opponent's Fable when it flips. But now you have to be like, well, what if my opponent proliferates their Fable of the Mirror Breaker and it flips a turn earlier than I thought? Then I can't take this turn off to draw cards.
Exactly.
So, I think it's interesting. Yeah. Also, how sick's that going to be?
Really good. Really good with Fable because you flip it immediately, like the turn after.
Yeah, oh wow, maybe that's another dream. Your opponent tries to kill you. Let's say your opponent tries to like destroy evil, your Fable when it's on 2, and you're like in response, experimental augury, flip it by exiling it and returning it transformed. Oh, that's I don't know. Now I'm just thinking of cool things that can happen with proliferate. So maybe we should have added that to the list of cards.
So open ended.
Yeah, so it's so nice that we finally can exploit a little bit more Fable of the Mirror Breaker, a card that hasn't seen much play.
Yeah,
Very
exactly.
exciting.
I can wait to try this card in new situations.
I think it's got a lot of potential.
yeah,
for
potential.
sure.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. So today, as I mentioned in the Carnies a few days ago, I played my standard match, and I curved out with Fable, and my opponent curved out with like Spirited Companion, Ambitious Farmhand, and I was like,
Fair card.
the power level seems a little bit different.
this
Although
Fable
sometimes
card.
it's explodable, like it's explodable by the reverse. So if you go Fable into Fable and your opponent has an aggressive draw, you're actually going to die. So that actually happened because your opponent was playing a deck that's weak to that, but like, it can go the other way very easily. Like, I've definitely gone Fable. Oh, wait, my opponent played like 3 2-drops. And these are 2/2 goblins. Oh no. You know?
Yeah, for sure. Mono red can easily beat a curve
Very
like that,
easily,
but
yeah.
like the mono white controller
Not so
needs
much.
a firewall. But yeah, it's definitely a good card.
What
no
happened?
need to repeat that.
We're trying to talk about new cards, and now we're talking about Fable. Let's
Okay,
get back
man,
on
what
track.
else do you like?
All right.
Yeah, what else do you like when you said?
Let's go back on track with I have a card here. So I read this card and I was like, okay, there's a lot of things going on here. We have to talk about it.
Okay.
It's Skrelv Defector Mite. It's an insect. It's a mite, actually. It's not an insect.
right.
Yeah,
Correction,
Marcos
mite.
was very happy with it. We have a friend that was like not happy because he was claiming that mites are not insects. So he was happy
Oh.
that this has changed.
Yeah, because the old the hay white mite is an insect.
Yeah.
Oh, well, they've clearly got the feedback. Wait, who was complaining about
So-
this, Javier?
Marcos, like from the
Marcos.
team from Sofia.
Yeah, obviously, yeah. That's so. Yeah. Well, I won't finish that.
Wow. So there's like back-to-back set. We have a mite that is actually a mite and a mite that is an insect.
Yeah, I mean,
Wow.
I wish the creative types were more unified, you know?
All right,
That's
that's our
confusing.
feedback. Wizards
That's
need
okay.
to improve their taxonomy, but
All right, so this card has a lot of text. First, Toxic 1, which is the ability of this card. It deals damage to the opponent. On top of dealing 1 damage, also gets 1 poison counter. And it can't block. And then you have Pyrexian Mana, so that's the old ability of either pay 1 white or 2 life. You tap it, you choose a color, another target creature you control gains Toxic 1 and X-Proof from that color until end of turn. And it can't be blocked by creatures of that color this turn. So basically what this card is a Giver of Runes that also gives the creature unblockable.
what do you mean? Also,
So-
I mean that's what Giver of Runes would do. But
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, that's true. Sorry, I was thinking that Giver of Runes only gives X-Proof, but yeah, Protection is also unblockable, I guess. But it also gives Toxic 1. So, I thought about this card, so again, I mostly play Modern, so my mind immediately went to Hammer Time, which is a deck that loves 1 mana card, loves Artifact, loves, to protect your things, but, so this would be like, similar to Giver of Runes, but it can also add this thing where it has poison counter, and you already play with Inkmoth Nexus, so you can't do that. But this card being a 1/1, it's huge in the format with so many ways to punish X1s,
opposite
like
of
Far
huge,
Rise,
yeah.
Renaissance,
yeah,
Fury, and such. So Giver of Runes, it's not even a 4 of in those decks, so if you really want Giver of Runes effect,
alright,
you probably
alright,
should
alright,
just
alright.
add more.
I'm gonna cut you off for a moment there, Mango. Hang on. Can we stop calling this card Giver of Runes? Alright, this is sort of a pet peeve, and I think it would help a lot of people if they were aware of this. But it's really not very good practice to so frequently or strongly evaluate new cards in the frame of old cards that don't exactly match what they are. So this card, a lot of people, I'm not saying it's necessarily just you, Mango, because everybody does it. Everybody is calling this card a Giver of Runes. It's not Giver of Runes. I mean, it just doesn't do the same thing. Right? Like, we really should evaluate this card as just Skrell. Like, if we say this card, I don't know, just call the card Skrell or whatever. You don't say it's like a Giver of Runes. Like, a lot of people say, oh, what card do you mean? I mean the new Giver of Runes. Or they say, what? I'm really excited to play Giver of Runes in my standard deck or my hammer deck or whatever. I mean, it's not. Just call it Skrell. Because the problem is that if you call it Giver of Runes, it's going to start tripping you up. Like it did just now, right? Where you got a bit confused about what the card did because you were thinking of what Giver did, or you got a bit confused what Giver did because of what this card does. Like, Giver of Runes has like different functionality. Like it prevents damage, and it's like defensively useful, that sort of thing, right? That's not like this card doesn't do those things.
This card's confusing also, Anthony. Like, why does it say like hexproof from that color, but also like it cannot be blocked that color? Is it like it doesn't give protection because that will not be a protection thing, or
no? It doesn't give protection so that you can't block it constantly with it. So like it's not defensively
okay, so it doesn't. Okay, so it doesn't
so
work defensively
that's what I'm saying.
at all.
Like Give of Runes has that functionality.
Okay.
This card does not. So every time we call this card Give of Runes, we just make it more confusing to understand like the exact capabilities of the card.
Yeah, it got me for sure. Yeah, it got me for
exactly.
sure.
That's what I'm saying. Like people really need to like not do this, and everyone does it every spoiler season with all the cards, and it always just bothers me so much. You know?
Okay, I guess. So this is a Giver of Runes that doesn't work on defense.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, but then we might as well just say that's a big difference, you know?
It is. It can block and doesn't work on defense.
So,
all right. Yeah. I mean, you knew that, Mengu? I didn't realize that. Like, it doesn't work for
blocking. No. I mean, there's definitely a lot of things going on here, so I definitely missed that part. But yeah, another outside of giving sort of protection, this card also gives toxic to a creature. And if you build a toxic deck, which maybe is happening in standard, I don't know. I think in modern, the toxic ability, I think, dodges exactly the pump spell. Like, they made this mechanic probably to just diverge from the old Infect, where you would just pump your creature and kill on turn 2.
Yeah, it's no fun. Yeah.
But what you can do is that with like maybe many of those cards, and you can just accumulate toxic, right? Because if a creature has toxic 1 3 times, it deals 3 poison counter.
That's right.
Yeah, and some other cards have toxic 2. For example, today I spoiled a common that it's a 2-mana 3/1 with toxic 2. Obviously, that is not a very good constructed card, but just saying that maybe in standard, I think this card, the toxicity of this card might actually be more important than the protection.
Could be. Like, I could see that being the case.
I don't think it's more important, but I think it's definitely a substantial part of the card that would be really easy to miss. That could be a big deal. Like, against certain decks, for example, you could see that mattering, right? Like, maybe there's there's a lot of mono-white decks that, maybe at some point they'll gain a lot of life with Steel Seraph or something, which, that's not that uncommon. And this card would be like, don't care, 10 poison, right? So...
there's also like a mechanic. Yeah. There's this mechanic where the corrupt, where if they have 3 counters, the spell costs less or does much. Yeah. So maybe this is also like the best enabler. I mean, I don't think there will be better enablers to those cards than this card, because it just like gives the creature literally toxic and not being able to be blocked. So maybe that card's good and that axis. I'm just still recovering myself from not being able to block with the creatures.
It would be pretty weird if they said this card can't block, but it can make another thing block forever. Like, yeah.
Today I previewed another card, which is a 2-mana instant counter target spell unless the controller pays 2, which is similar to Make Disappear. And then if the controller of the spell has 3 or more poison counter, you just counter that spell. So it would be like a counter spell.
Yeah, that one I was thinking of. I was thinking of that one, exactly.
Cards like Bring the Ending, or like Skrell's Hive, which, gives you all the...
Yeah, exactly. Bring the Ending is the one that I previewed right now.
Yep.
Was it already leaked?
I don't know.
No, it was today, right?
Okay. No, because... Okay.
It was from today, I think, yeah.
But I think, that toxic stuff aside, I think the biggest application for this card is that it seems really perfect for the Esper decks that exist in Standard. And I guess those decks have underperformed a little bit more recently. So I guess a little bump is welcome. I think this card is just... it's almost designed for that deck, almost. Like, it's legendary, and that deck has a lot to do with it. Like, it's easier to cast because of Plaza, and you have the channel lands, and blah, blah, blah. But that deck specifically has, like, some very high priority cards to protect. Like, this card with Rafine or Sheoldred seems great, and that deck is pretty aggressive, so it can use Skrelv really well, because I think you want to be aggressive. I mean, that's not a surprise. The card literally says can't block on it. But I think, being aggressive is super important for Skrelv. But another interesting point is that deck doesn't have any 1-drops, but can fit this card well, I think. So that just means that your ability to curve out is just increased, right? Like, now, before it was never possible for the Rafine deck to go 1, 2, 3, 4 as a curve out, because there were no good 1-drops. But now it can. So what that deck can do is actually substantially more powerful, I think. And and the ability to protect. Like the games where you have Rafina's Esper are so different to the ones where you don't. Now you get to keep it so much more often. I have very high hopes with this card in Esper.
I would say that the mana base of Standard make it very hard to go 1, 2, 3. Though,
Not
right?
with Plaza of Heroes.
Plaza of Heroes, like this card being legendary is actually what makes it possible, because Plaza of Heroes is a card that Esper already wanted to play, but now if you have a Plaza in your hand, 1, 2, 3 is like not very hard. Like Plaza, Painland, and a Slowland, that's enough, Like any Slowland into any Painland will most likely make it. So it's not
a big part of Esper's appeal is that Plaza of Heroes makes its mana better than pretty much any other 3-color deck, and so Skrelv being legendary really helps out with that, I think.
Plaza of Heroes is so pushed. I just read it now.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
I think everyone forgets one ability, usually. I think the easy one is, I noticed a lot of people who didn't play a lot of Standard forget that it taps for any color of a legendary permanent you have, so it fixes after you have a legendary thing in play. So like at first it will like fix you for Denic, but then when you have Denic in play, it can cast Destroy Evil or Wedding Announcement. A lot of people miss that, I think. Or that they forget that it gives both Hexproof and Indestructible. Like, it's quite easy to miss one or the other.
So we will have a card that gives Hexproof and can be blocked and Toxic, and then a card will give Hexproof and Indestructibility.
Yeah, so we just have to find a good legendary creature to protect.
Okay.
All right, but I don't want to say there's 0% chance that you play this in number time, though.
Okay, not 0, because 0 is pretty harsh, but I'm going to say single-digit percentages.
No,
I'm going to give it 6%, actually.
Yeah.
Exactly 6%. I think that's very fair, because the card keeping out is Ren and 6.
Yeah, Ren and 6.
I really like the fact that it gives Toxic 1.
It is interesting.
You already have four Inkmoth Nexus that you can like pump with various equipments. They don't have to necessarily give plus 10 plus 10. It can even be like...
Well, we gave anything plus 10.
Yeah, but I think even if Toxic matters some games, I think you play this card, you play one game, you lose the die roll, they grant 6 this on turn 2, and you just cut it from your deck. You need to win enough games with Toxic to make up those games, and I don't think that's even possible.
Unlikely.
Like, it's impossible. Like, you have to just consistently win games with Toxic, and that's
the thing is, like, you don't even want to give stuff Toxic a lot of the time because you have to hold it up to protect your creature anyway. I don't think. So. I think 6% is just too generous. I think as long as Ren and 6 is legal, it will be low. Wow. Right. Well,
if Ren and 6 wasn't legal, then things will change.
Ren and 6, so I'm gonna. But I still want the number to be 6, so I'm gonna say 0.6.
Okay, I can get behind that. Yeah.
All right, 0.6%.
Yeah, maybe it's more likely, but I don't think it's necessarily for Ren and 6. Like, it's not a card that you see that much these days. But I understand that.
Yeah. I mean, it's not the only card that's iconic.
It also doesn't block Ragavan. Like, you want to draw the Ragavan, you play this card, and it's like, well, my 1-drop doesn't block
that's
this one.
Big deal.
Also.
Yeah, that also is important.
It's a lot of ifs. I think it's a lot of ifs for a card that's not like that good when it works. When it works, is like pretty much Giver of Runes that gives Toxic.
Yeah, for sure.
So what I'd like to say about the card is it might be really good. I just wanted to add that. Might be really good.
How do you spell it?
I'm not answering that question.
Let's move on, Javier. You have the first Planeswalker to talk about today.
Yep, this is Nissa, Senate Animist, which is it's a little bit weird to explain. It's 7 mana, but 2 of them are Phyrexian completed mana, which means if you use those mana, you can pay 2 life, but also the loyalty will be 2 less for each mana paid, which is something we have seen before in other like Planeswalkers like this. But this one is Nissa, it's 7 mana, and it's +1, create an XX horror, where X is the Nissa ability, loyalty. -1, it does Naturalize, and -7, it just does +1/+1 to each creature you control for each forest, and trample also, right? So it's a little bit strange. I mean, the biggest issue with this card is green is not, I want to say very playable. It's not very good in standard, so I think unfortunately this card is not going to be like probably like defining standard. But if Rin becomes better, I think this card will be good. Like, it's 7 mana. Obviously, if you play like mono green or whatever, you just like can win the game on the spot, like Kreta Behemoth the way. But also it's like a 5 mana. You put a 4, like a 5/5 first, but then 6/6, 7/7, 8/8. So it's like a Planeswalker that's gonna protect itself very well. But also the -1 seems very good now in a standard where, you know, there's a lot of board situations where where they just have like a Bankbuster or a winning announcement that just tapped out to play like, and they just can play this guy, kill their Bankbuster, and then you have threat that's threatening to take over the board. And,
I mean,
yeah.
Yep. Go on, sorry.
Yeah, I think that's probably like the best way to play this card is like, do you remember when we played Vivian back in the day, the 5-mana Vivian?
This huge Vivian vibes.
Yeah, this is huge Vivian bias, but instead of giving card advantage, you can spay some life and, you know, have like actual board presence, which should be better. Like, you know, this is a world where a lot of Corpse Bracers and like Fables are around, so just putting a 5/5 is like often going to be like large enough. I think the -7 is like a trap a little bit, where I don't think this card's going to be good because of the -7. Of course, if you're playing Black Green or even Junt, you know, you're going to have some forest because of the Triumphs being forest, but I don't think Mono Green is where this card will shine. I think Black Green X, like most possibly Junt or even Naja, will be where this card will shine. Like, I just think this card, if I'm playing Naja, for example, just white, red, Fable, and removals or whatever, and just play this guy on 5. Like, this card just can dominate the game in a way where it's very hard to counter, and it's not good against Invoke, but also not exactly super bad. Like, if you play Kill a Fable on the Invoke, it's not ideal, but it's not as bad as other cards will be. So I think this is, I mean, obviously this is like only for Standard, but I think in a Standard, I think this card is maybe as good as Vivian was back in the day, which then again, it did not define the format, but it was a 5-mana playable Planeswalker.
Well, yeah, Vivian was a bit weird because it was like unplayed for a bit, and then after a while circumstances changed and it surged in. I was going to say, like, you mentioned like how good the -1 is. I mean, I've seen Standard lists that just straight up play Disenchant. Like, they just main deck 2 Disenchants, right? So
Yeah.
having that naturalize on a Planeswalker is kind of awesome. The way I thought of it was like kind of a cross between Vivian Reader and Ren and 7. But if you compare this to Ren and 7, this is like so sick, right? That you tick up to make the big thing instead of ticking down. Obviously, it's not as big, but ticking up is a massive difference.
Yeah, ticking up on creation a creature is very rare. Like, it's not very common. I mean,
and like genuinely threatening one, not just like random like
exactly.
one, you know, whatever.
No, I mean, I remember the 6-mana Esper, the 6-mana Elspeth that was like, you know, +1, 3 creatures. Like, that card that was super hard to kill because and getting creatures at the same time is very hard. Of course, this is only creating one body, but getting loyalty and creatures at the same time, that's my experience very powerful. A very powerful text to have in a Planeswalker.
One thing I didn't quite agree on, I actually think the ultimate is probably important. I agree that I wouldn't play them on a green, but I don't think you have to. I don't think you need like that many forests for this to be pretty good. Because of the amount of board stalls that happen in Standard, I could easily see this being like +3/+3 trample being a really big deal. Like, I think that makes this card like more modal. Because
it is more modal, yeah. Like, you have 2 Fables, you have 2 top Fable tokens, and 1 random creature, whatever, and you have 3 forests of 4. Suddenly they're dead, right? Like, they just take -12. Yeah, I think that's good. You don't need to be 7. It doesn't need to be 7. It's fine. You know, being 1 forest, 2 triumphs, that's fine. Like,
yeah, I think so. I could see. Yeah, so I think I really like that this card has so many different modes. Yeah.
Say it.
Go on.
I have a question. If this Planeswalker loyalty like goes to 0 because you're -7, do the Phyrexian Horror die?
No, it's set as you create them. So the first time you tick it up, as the ability resolves, you make an XX as that, and it doesn't change. So the first one you make.
All right, then you. Yeah, then you don't need much if the tokens are like, you know, 4/4 or 6/6.
Yep,
I guess you could tick it up like that way. We just meant like just straight up casting it for 7 and immediately bidding it. So it's just like a split card.
If you tick it up, it's mostly gonna be lethal. Like, like it's mostly which is good. Also, you can play it on 5. You know, it goes 4 to 5 and 6, then 7 that wins the game. That's fine also.
Yeah. We talked about Vivian raid a little bit, but I think one of the strengths of Vivian in that Standard was also that it was killing the flyers, which were
so it was a little different.
Popular.
But right now, killing artifacts and enchantments is just so good right now. Like,
also only -1 loyalty. Like, you can play this one on 4, kill an enchantment. You can kill 3 enchantments and the guy is still alive. Like, the Nissa card is...
Yeah, Vivian was -3.
Yeah, exactly. So. I think this is a cross between Vivian and the old Nissa 5-mana. I think it's closer to Vivian, but it also has the common pattern that the other Nissa had where, you know, you create tokens and creatures while having a high loyalty count, which is something it's clearly, I mean, even the picture is similar or whatever, right? Like the art.
It is? Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I didn't notice that.
it's about the same art, and the ability is very similar. The first one, this doesn't get the mana boost. Yeah. I think it's a worse card than Nissa, but Nissa was like, you know, pretty good. You know, like,
that one was fucked up.
Yeah, so the card was very good, but I think this is just in between those 2 cards, maybe a little bit more like Vivian, but this is definitely, from my opinion, better than Grand 7 and good enough to be played. The only downside is green, which is not a very good card on Standard right now. But if
Yeah, I was
this
going
could
to
be enough.
ask, what are the green shell? What are the green shell to play green? Because I played standard a little bit. I haven't seen a single green.
I mean, you could
deck.
just play black, red, green. Just Fable, removals, Shield Red, and these
There was some
cards
Jund
tap
decks
on.
before, but
Yeah.
the problem with Jund was that it's pretty bad against Esper. Like, the blue cards, the counter spells in general, are fairly punishing, and a lot of the green cards are, like, not as good at catching up, but, I mean, if they printed enough good green cards, then maybe. Because it wasn't, like, hideously far behind or anything. It's not like the deck doesn't work, it's just that the deck was kind of too similar, and didn't have, and what it had didn't line up well against other decks. Because a lot of the reason to play green was, for example, Titan of Industry. But that sucks when people are main decking a bunch of make disappears, right? But maybe different payoffs could work. It's hard to tell.
Yeah, we'll see. I like this number is good against Brotherhood 10 also. You play Nissan 5, U plus, the creatures are large enough to survive, and the Planeswalker also to survive Brotherhood's End. And also that plays well with that card. Like you could play Jund with Brotherhood's End on Nissa.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Like there's a lot of things to explore. But I think this Stoppin is a good card, and I feel like standard 5 mana is where most of the cure stops, but so far, except like big guys like Angel and such. But I think 5 is, yeah, I like this card. I would like to play with it and see how it goes.
Peace.
And often on my stream, people ask me the name of the podcast where it does come from, and it's Carnage Tyrant. I remember with Vivian Reed, we were often +1 and get Carnage Tyrant to our
the
hand.
Carnies.
So
Old friend.
that's a little bit of a. Yeah.
I mean, I'm also going to commend this one because there's also the new Carnage Tyrant in the set, which is not as lovely as the actual Carnage Tyrant. It's just a 7 mana, 8/8, trample, haze, whatever. I mean, it's just way less charismatic than Carnage Tyrant. So I judge it as a worse card. I'm sorry, Tyrannos Rex.
It's a high bar.
Yeah, four copies of Carnage Tyrant. That's what we want to bring back to standard.
Exactly.
Of Tyrann, what's the name?
Tyrannex Rex,
Rex.
Yeah, took us there. I don't like you so much. Sorry, Tyrannex Rex. Nice
It's a
try.
high bar. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe we can still like it and not want to not want to name a podcast after it. You know,
That's true. That's true.
yeah.
Toxic 4 though.
Okay. Let's get to the last preview card we want to talk about. Anthony, what do you bring us?
It's the Eternal Wanderer. So it's 4 white for legendary planeswalker. No more than one creature can attack the Eternal Wanderer each combat. And it has a +1 where you exile up to 1 target artifact or creature, return it to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of that player's next end step. It can 0 to create a 2/2 with double strike, and it can -4. And when you do, you choose a creature for each player, and then sacrifice all creatures that weren't chosen this way. So you get to pick for each other player as well. To be clear, it starts with 5 loyalty, which is kind of important because it doesn't really have an ultimate. Because, I mean, you can use it as soon as it enters the battlefield, which is not really how we think of ultimates. So I think this card is really, really promising. So this is kind of similar to Nissa, in that I think a big appeal of this card is the modality of it. But one of the modes of this card is so much more consistently useful than Nissa's Overrun, which is that -4. I mean, you can definitely see a lot of spots where it would be very useful to have a board wipe in your standard games, but it's not very easy to put a board wipe in your deck because all the board wipes that exist only do that, and they're very situational. But effects that are situational and powerful are really ideal on modal cards, and the Eternal Wanderer has that very well because it's on a threat, so it's never going to be dead the way a situational card can be, like Farewell. But when it's useful, you can slam this card, and I think it's quite powerful. This version of a board wipe. It's similar to Tragic Arrogance, which is a card from a while back, but yeah, that type of sweeper has a good pedigree. I think all the abilities on this card are quite good as well. Like if you're very far behind, you just play this and play the -4, and you probably won't be so far behind. If you're even, then I think the 0 ability is quite strong as well. Like a 2/2 with double strike is pretty easy to make powerful, I think, when this is often going to be paired with cards like Raffine that pump those creatures. And the +1's not great, I think, but there are some synergies that you can have with it. The main reasons I would see the +1 is that if you have some creature that has value with it, so maybe like Urtai Resurrected or something is good with this card. There's another card that this would work well with called Malkator Purifying Overseer or something like that. It's 1 white and a blue for a card that's very similar to Blade Splicer. It's a 1/1 that creates a golem when it enters. So that could be good, because, same thing as Relv, where being a legendary creature is very well suited to Esper. That deck can use multiple bodies, and then blinking that card would get you a bunch of 3/3s. And perhaps the most fringe use for the +1 is that it's also very good against Siphon Insight. So if this card sees play, watch out for that, I guess.
True.
So I don't know. I think there's a lot to this card. I just like how flexible it is. Like, it's not that good at doing any one thing. Because I probably wouldn't play a 6/6 that just made a double strike 2/2 every turn. That's kind of slow, right? Like, you don't want your card to generate incremental value with a 6-drop. But I love that this lets you fit a board wipe into your otherwise proactive deck. It can grind people out. It can threaten them. So, yeah. I think this card could also be great for Esper. Same, it's kind of funny, yeah. 1-drop and a 6-drop.
One thing that this card...
Go on, yeah.
One thing that this card will be very good in standard for is because of Farewell doesn't hit Planeswalkers, so you can actually commit to the board, make your opponent commit more to the board because you have this thing, and once they did that, you go Farewell.
Well, maybe,
and you
but
keep the Eternal Wanderer.
I sort of think this card would replace Farewell, but it's good against your opponent's Farewell, to be fair, which is kind of the appeal as well.
It's a combo, though. Yeah, you play. I like it. You play combo 6-drop into 6-drop. It's a little bit ambitious, but I like it.
Straight commandering in here.
I mean, this kind of things actually win games, they defeat opponents in standard.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely happening. The games go long enough for that to happen, that's for sure.
But they're already playing the Sanctum, what's the name?
Warden.
6 mana, 5/5.
Yeah,
so they're playing that one.
I think this card is probably better, though. I think I like this one more.
So. And I know we said stuff about expensive Planeswalkers often being bad against Invoke Despair, but I think that applies less to this one, because the -4 is almost a spell that you would play anyway. Right, it's obviously not quite there. You wouldn't play just a 4/white sorcery that did that, but this does that, and then leaves a Planeswalker that's quite threatening left over. So, yeah, I think the rules apply less to Planeswalkers that get value immediately, in terms of being weak to Invoke Despair. So, also this card kind of gets covered by that with the other Emperor, I guess. So.
Yeah, that's true. You can have Emperor Tribal, Wanderer Tribal or whatever.
Yeah,
there's 3 already of them. 2 of them illegal in standard, so.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure someone there, somewhere in the world has a Wanderer triple
if you
deck.
Think about it, clearly the Wanderer on average has the best, as a character, has the best Planeswalkers.
Yeah, if someone has a Wanderer tribal, I would like to see it. Feel free to tag me on Twitter. I mean, I don't know if Wanderer has better. I mean, I guess the average is better than Teferi, because Wanderer
Teferi has a bunch of absolute garbage cards that you would never consider paying more than €2.
I don't know. The War of the Spark Wanderer is pretty bad also. The 4 mana, 5 loyalty.
Oh man, I totally forgot that card even existed. Oh, okay.
It's a Wanderer before they decide to show the face. There was the Wanderer
I genuinely thought there were only 2, and I was like, wow, can you imagine the only 2 cards are the Wandering Emperor and this card? That's so sick.
No, I think Teferi may be better. Who knows?
Okay, maybe. No, I think Teferi's average is just dragged down too much by Teferi Master of Time. I think it's just too rough. Yeah.
Okay.
Speaking of buying a foil overpriced Teferi, I just bought the 5 mana Teferi after the last podcast for €10 each.
Oh, it was
10.
foil?
That's a whole digit less than the one that we made fun of you for. So
yeah,
that's all right.
Exactly.
That's all right.
Yeah. But I also wanted to mention that it's going to be fun to be playing the Wandering Emperor with your 2/2 Vigilant Samurai alongside with the Eternal Wanderer with your 2/2 Samurai with Double Strike. That will make the paper experience very easy, I'm sure.
Oh, true. So there's 2/2 Samurai Vigilance and 2/2 Samurai Double Strike. Nice.
I'm sure they'll look pretty different, but also there's some synergy there, right? You can give your Double Strike 1/1/1 counters. That's kind of good, I guess.
Yeah, but it's right, Mengu.
Strong.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the tokens, I don't know.
And also, a Ambassador token, and also Treasure token.
This is how I know Mengu hasn't played that much paper standard yet, because he hasn't had to deal with the mess that is the Grixis deck and tokens. Just Fable of the Mirror Breaker alone is just so much cardboard.
He played in Sophia.
You need a treasure. You need a copy.
Yeah.
Yes. Sophia was like that.
Pioneer.
Yeah. I think it was 7. No, it was 10 tokens different or something like that. Something super extreme. Also Sock and Sand. Providing the token value. Yeah,
it's a lot.
Yeah, I don't mind tokens, but I will have a little bit less of different tokens.
Yeah, that would be nice.
All right, I think that's enough new cards, right? Let's just talk a little bit about what happened this weekend, shall we?
All right, old cards.
Let's do it. Okay, so we had the Mox final, the 8 people tournament where 2 people go to Worlds, and they were DMX and Demian Luke. The most interesting deck list with Blue Red Murktide in Modern was the winner. The most interesting deck of the tournament to me as a Modern expert is for sure the Domain Zoo by Kar Serap and his teammate Stefan Schutz. So it's very cool to me because Domain Zoo, it's kind of like my quote-unquote pet tag on my YouTube video, definitely the one that does the best. And I also done pretty well with it. I had 2 or 3 trophies with it already.
Nice.
And the deck lists are almost all similar. And I like to see that Carl just basically took the first list that came out and mostly just changed the sideboard. So what you do, of course, is you are a Domain Zoo deck with 5 colors, and you're playing powerful cards that were previously banned in Modern, such as Wild Nakado.
Wow, incredible.
So good.
Isn't the Burst Lightning? Look at Burst Lightning. It's just conquering.
All the decks.
Slowly conquering Modern. It started in Creativity, and now it's in Zoo. What next?
What's next? Blood and Murtide does with Burst Lightning, I think, is next.
Did I put Burst Lightning in my cube? Because it's not in
Clearly,
my cube.
you must.
Currently.
Clearly,
should.
it's an egregious oversight if you haven't. I think with a card of this pedigree, it's interesting though. Like
I actually think the card's good. Like,
Yeah.
it's a cute playable card, most likely.
yeah, I mean, I thought it was a bit surprising because I mean, you can like I would have thought maybe Play with Fire could be better, but with this deck in the Creativity deck, maybe if you just wanted a shock, but with this deck, I think the 4 damage mode is like way more relevant. Like you're going to burn your opponent out a lot more. One thing I'll mention is that clearly Carl and Stefan were very confident in this deck being good because we saw the deck before they were choosing it. They were choosing between this and Eldrazi Tron or something, I think. And I told them, look, I'm gonna level with you. You have to. I'll be honest with you. If you play this deck and you do poorly, I will bully you a lot by repeatedly referring to the time that you scrubbed the Mox with 5-color poo, right? So they needed to be sure that this was good. And Stefan said he was maybe not sure he would submit it in light of that. It's a very grave consequence to risk, eternal mockery, but did it anyway. Actually, they did well, so I'm not going to get to call it 5-color poo, which I'm kind of sad about because I thought it was very clever. Good deck though.
Yeah, the deck looks good, and it's also like I like the last time we talked about these decks, I talk about like how I like the sideboards where all the cards were like just like complete houses, like just very good, and this sideboard is like that. This is the old bar, Rest in Peace, Hashbringer, Lavinia, Bud Mirror, except Iteration, I guess, which is a little bit more like shorts game against Blue Red. The rest of the cards are just like 10s, if you say what I mean. I did like the deck that they show up with. For sure. I
also enjoyed like the 3 Nishoba Brawler 2 Tarmogoyf. Just reading that made me feel like it was a giant middle finger to all fans of Tarmogoyf. So
yeah, but now this one though is like a little bit more standard.
Honestly, when I made a league with the 3 Nishoba Brawler 2 Tarmogoyf, I was just so much happier with Tarmogoyf every time.
Really? Okay.
Like, I saw Karl playing against Blue Murktide and he cited out some copy of Nishoba Brawler. And like you would never cite out Tarmogoyf. I guess he's bringing in maybe Rest in Peace.
Yeah.
He's maybe bringing in Rest in Peace against them, but obviously can't have Tarmogoyf and Rest in Peace together. But I don't know. I think there's still something to improve because also in the mana base. So I feel like whenever I break with this deck, it's when I don't draw fetch lands. Like if you draw 2 fetch lands, your deck is great. So I think you can cut even more lands. Like I understand that Overgrown Tomb is cool because you can go like 3rd on top land for Overgrown Tomb, Sign of Draco plus 1-drop. So I think it's where you need the Overgrown Tomb. But at the same time, I think when this deck, sometimes you just have to mulligan hands with 2 lands because, they are not fetch lands. And so I just love to just add more and more fetch lands to the deck.
What about cutting a basic? You think the deck can cut a basic and play only 1 basic so you can play 1 more fetch, for example? Will that make you happy?
Yeah, so the basically you can cut is the Forest because you want to keep playing for Arcast Binding against Blood Moon. But then sometimes with this deck you want to save life. So you just fetch with Forest because you already took like 6 damage in the first 2 turns. and something like this. So you want to go like Plains and Forest after you went for example, Steam Vent's Temple Garden, let's say, against an aggro deck. And I think it's very difficult to have a correct opinion because again, there's so many different scenarios in Modern. So sometimes you might need an Overgrown untapped, or sometimes you might need a Forest, or sometimes you just want to have more fetch lands. But this deck list is this mana base is mostly the stock one right now, and I think there's still some improvement to be made.
Okay. Good. I mean, I think this deck you could pick up and play for a tournament and be fine and be sure the deck is good enough to win the tournament or whatever. But I agree. I mean, of course, there's always like more things to improve, and especially a deck like has been like a little bit less explored than other archetypes. Like Lurid Murktide has like a lot of experts already playing the deck for literally months. So this deck is a little bit more new, if that makes it's not new, but you know what I mean, right? Like it's been less explored.
Yeah, for sure.
On it.
But I saw some. I think this deck it has potential. Kabu is just like super strong. Like I just keep being impressed by the card, and yeah, maybe this deck should get like more respect / like metagame share. We'll see.
Yeah, another deck that was made possible by Leyline Binding. So
yep, true.
That's cool.
True.
For sure. Again, what you said is very true. Like, Modern is like not a format that, I mean, despite it's a format that many people play, it's not a format that many people tune. So you have a lot of people working on like Murktide, Scam, Hammer, so you have those lists defined. But on the lower tiers of decks, you have powerful decks like the Zoo deck, and like not that many people are working on it. So it's nice to see that those world-class players are picking it up and trying to play it and improve it instead of...
Yeah.
Also because...
I think...
Yeah, go ahead.
I think it is important to note that a lot of the time the value of doing that is to do with metagaming. So this was partly a metagame choice, and I think this choosing 5-color Zoo was a good example of how you should probably approach deck selection for modern events. Which is that they specifically were trying to look for a deck, to my knowledge, they were specifically trying to look for a deck to exploit the fact that they thought that no one was going to play Hammer. So they are looking to metagame against their modern opponents, but doing so out of a deck with a reasonable power level. So you can't just play something just completely ridiculous on the basis that it might be well positioned, but out of, after decks of a certain power level, that's the main consideration. Like, just look at what's not there, and then try to exploit that. In terms of a deck that would otherwise be a bit soft to it, which I guess is also a hint that if people are playing Hammer, you probably shouldn't play this deck. But it's like, I'm playing this deck because it's a metagame choice, but also I actually think it's good. Should be most of the... that should be true of most of the decks you choose for a modern tournament, I think. Or at least an important one. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious to know what do they feel was the matchup of this deck versus Murktide.
I think it was decent, yeah.
I assume it has to be like slightly behind, like, but not like 45, 55 kind of thing, for sure. Yeah. I will expect this deck to be good against the Breach decks and the like Prowess decks because of how large the attackers are. Like Draco and Kabu can actually like stomp these guys, but this deck is like not particularly well suited to be the counterspell iteration mid-long game, so they have to rush under.
Hang on.
And it's not always easy to rush under the Blue Red Murktide, especially when they have like Bolt on the Nishova. Like there's like some negative tempo exchanges they can make, and yours are like your tempo exchanges that are positive are often like it involves them running into it, like binding into the region, for example. So whenever they have the decision, like where they can choose not to do so, you don't have any choice, or you have to run your threats because otherwise iterations will grind you. So I will say that's why it should be a little bit behind. Also like Cyber Blood Moon or whatever, that also doesn't help.
Well, I just checked. They actually did feel that the deck was significantly ahead against Murktide.
I would be surprised if that's the case, but I mean, I could be wrong. Yeah, like that's at least on paper. On my experience on the Murktide side, I just think that also Dress Down now being played again and being like a killer against Kabu also. So yeah, I mean,
I don't have any information other than that they beat it a lot in testing, I guess.
Yes, it is. I mean, that could be like that could be the. I just haven't played, of course, the matchup much. I have played something.
Yeah, so that's something to look at maybe, but
I would say that this is the classic Murktide that it's negative. Whenever counterspell is bad in the matchup, Murktide is bad game 1, and it's typically good post-sideboard, because you replace Counterspell with amazing sideboard card in this case, like Dress Down, or Blood Moon is interesting, because of course, like, if you play Blood Moon on an empty board, you win the game, but sometimes you might be 2 behind, so Blood Moon is bad. Overall, I wouldn't be too unhappy to play against with Murktide against this deck, but I can totally understand that game 1 you're unfavorite, and I would say that, yeah, I mean, it's definitely interesting to claim that a deck with 20 creatures is good against Murktide, because Murktide is, happy to play against those decks. But I understand that the explosiveness of Leyline Binding and the efficiency of Treble Flames, and the efficiency of Leyline Binding against your threats could be good against Murktide for sure.
Yeah, possibly.
All right. Well, let's talk a little also about let's move on the the qualifier also online. Mm-hmm. Which, I mean, Mengu said it was a deck to play next week, and he did win the qualifier. Mengu, what happened in the tournament?
Yeah, that's funny, right? So I remember when you told me once, oh, should I play Rhinos in the preliminary? I said, no, play Living End. I think Living End is better than Rhinos right now. And I believe there was not a single Rhino in the three, like the 2 challenges and the PTQ top 8, and the winner of the PTQ, which was this 380 people, which I also took part of, was Living End. So it's pretty cool. This is the list that Maninone keeps in trophying with and won the mocks with. At this point, it's kind of like the stock list. Just strong deck, not that many respected, and I just want to say that the current Murktide lists didn't really respect Living End, in my opinion, and with like the number of spells that are going up, the number of like Flusterstorm going down, a Licensors is not very good against Living End, and here it is. I mean, also Living End just being great against Rhinos, which is very popular. Like in the PTQ, my first 2 opponents were playing Rhinos and it won, and then I don't know. I think that Rhinos is okay as a choice, but now it's kind of like, it's just that if people expect to play against Rhinos naturally becomes worse deck, because it's not a very good deck. It's fine. It's a consistent deck, but it's easy to tune against it. Whereas Living End, in order to tune against it, you have to put cards that are just not very good against other decks. Whereas against Rhinos, you can just add Engineered Explosives, which it's a card that it's
very good.
It's not bad.
It is very good to when you're playing Rhinos and they have this kind of cards, the percentage just goes down rapidly. Like you can of course always bail out just by you having like Rhinos into Force of Negation, whatever. But yeah, I agree. Like Rhinos is not very good if they are respected. They're only good if they're not respected by the metagame. I guess it's similar. Like in that regard, it's similar to Living End. They just fight for the metagame spot, but if people expect Rhinos, you should probably play Living End, and they expect Living End, you should probably play Rhinos. That's probably how it is.
Yeah, for sure. So the PTQ, just classic modern event, 8 different deck in the top 8. Things to note are, in my opinion, the Timur Creativity deck is now playing Explore, a card that I haven't seen in a while, but I think it makes a lot of sense, once again, in a world where Rhinos and Living End are popular. You want to run, you want to go faster, and Explorer lets you do that. So I like the 3 Explorer. And also interesting, in the sideboard, there's 2 copy of Jaya Fiery Negotiator.
Wow.
Anthony favorite card from Dominaria.
I don't know if it was my favorite card, but yeah, I thought it was going to be better than it was.
Oh, I mean, it does make sense here, even though I haven't seen. I mean, I never tried it, and I didn't see it before. But maybe, right?
Yeah, you can make a monk and then target it with creativity.
Yeah, it makes tokens.
I like it.
Or just make a bunch of monks and monk beat down them also.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, I like the Bring to Let Scape deck, which I have done very well with in leagues. I played 2 leagues with this deck, and I'm 9-1 with it. Also made the final. Just basically one of these Ren 6 decks that I guess I want to say it's the most successful version of Omnath, because this deck came 9th in Trieste. I don't think I've seen Ren 6 Omnath doing well recently, and this might be the one that's doing the best.
Is it the same deck list? It's similar, but it's not the same, right?
It's not the same because this version is the old one.
Okay.
And the quote-unquote inventor of the deck has cut Grazer for Prismatic Ending.
I see. Yeah, because I think Prismatic Ending makes more sense now. Their metagame has like more share than blue-red and stuff like that, right? But maybe Grazer is better against blue-red. I don't know, but I will say Ending is better against Shredder. How do you feel?
So Grazer has the... If you have a God draw, you want to have Grazer. Like if you have like Random 6, for example, in your hand, you want to have Grazer. But there's a lot of time where Grazer it's really bad. So I think it kind of spikes. Like Prismatic Ending is a more like solid card in a longer tournament, whereas Grazer is a little bit more like has more chances of hitting your nut draw and more chances of just drawing a totally dead card.
Yeah, I think like the deck doesn't have enough card advantage to handle that many Grazers. I mean, 3 is not that many, but it could also be a split. It could be like 1 Grazer, 2 Endings on the other way around, I guess. Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Yeah, could be.
All right.
Another thing that's cool to mention before heading off is there was a challenge on Sunday where 2 players brought the same deck without talking to each other, and they top 8'd both, which is the quote-unquote 8 Blast. That's the mono red deck that plays 4 Galvanic Blast and 4 Shrapnel Blast, and it's kind of like the pauper version of mono red, Vodalian Epicure and Experimental Synthesizer.
That's cool. Wild. Like this deck, it looks like the pauper deck, but with Ragavan and Channeler. Pretty much in Saga.
Yeah, and there's a Saga. This deck reminds me the Crack the Earth deck that disappeared, but where in just from nowhere 2 people in the top 8 in 1 league.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, props to Killer
one
Sheep.
of the decks has 14 cyber cards because they said they forgot to put the card. I mean, I have been guilty of that also many times in my life where I'm halfway in a league or a tournament, I'm like, ooh, I have 14 cards. No. So, it happens to all of us. I'm just saying.
All right, that was a nice Phyrexia All Will Be One preview discussion. It is now time to wrap it up. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, it's been pretty good. We will be back to normal schedule of like going through different formats next week, but we felt like talking to new cards as usual was good, and also like we had to go through Modern a little bit. So yeah, I like this one, and I hope everyone also did like it. What do you feel, Anthony?
Yeah, I mean, it's fun to talk about new cards. People love talking about new cards, and I hope we can offer a different perspective than that people might normally have access to in talking and thinking about new cards. So I'd like to do it each time, but yeah, I guess it's a lot to. It's not like we can comb over the entire set. I think that would be maybe a little too much for people. But let us know what you think.
I think there's something we should do, Anthony.
What's that?
I think we should do something like in a month or 2. We should just revisit what we said today. And just talk about like how wrong we were or how right we were in some situations.
And that's helpful. Yeah, but also I think people can just let us know if they want us to do more of this or if they want us to do less of this. Just tell us, and we will, we'll react accordingly. I think so.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, we're listening. We listen to the feedback, so feel free to show us your feedback or the Tribal Wonder decks also. Yeah,
yeah, that's probably just gonna be Esper.
All I want to see is a Skrelv Defector Might in a Hammer Time top 8 deck list. That's all I want to see.
Nice. All right. I want to bet there will be more Merfolks than those Mites in Hammer. That's my bet.
For sure.
That's rough.
All right. I also want to remind you that we do have a Patreon for our podcast. So if you're interested in supporting us and joining the Discord, you can check out patreon.com/carnies. And thank you so much for listening up to here. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Cheers.